I perform thousands of actions every day, not just the words I speak and the gestures I express, but the thoughts I have, the attitudes I hold, all of these subtle actions as well, thousands every day. And many of them happen without my conscious awareness. They're a habit, a reflex, but they are making an impact on others, on the world, on the self, my own quality of life, and even on my future. If I want to create a different impact, I'll have to perform different actions. If I want to create a world that I am happy to live in, a world that's aligned with my core values, then my own actions will have to be aligned with those core values. Habits can be a challenge to change. But when I say I am a soul, a spiritual being, I begin to introduce the power of my true nature. As a soul, my real or true nature is naturally aligned with my core values. Becomes a meeting of my natural nature with acquired habits. As the saying goes, whichever one I water is the one that will continue. I'm not going to battle against the habits. I'm going to water my true nature, discover it, understand it, nurture it, and of course, begin to apply it just by remembering I am a spiritual being. This natural awareness fosters that natural nature. Om Shanti.
to interview with the Raj Yogi. Tonight's topic is letting go of bad habits. Letting go. Letting go. Old habits. So tonight's topic was actually inspired by last week when we talked about change, trying to let go of things that keep cycling inside. We might have used the word addictions, but perhaps maybe sometimes we don't realize that addicting thoughts are addicting. We just think of some very extreme ideas of addictions. So it does feel like everyone can identify that there are some habits they do want to let go of. Of course, we are having an interview on Raj Yoga as the context. So perhaps maybe in terms of what is change about before we talk about habits, otherwise I think it's pretty easy to kind of lose the point of what Raj Yoga is for.
It's quite interesting in yoga framework what change looks like, because when we think of change, we often think of going from where we are to something. We do talk about use that language definitely. Yoga from to the new is actually the original. So it's to change, and because we're returning to an original state, that change becomes connected with the deep soul. Then you actually miss that original stage. It's a very personal thing. So there's timing as to when one starts to long for or miss that original state. So it's kind of a different concept of change that's a little bit comforting and satisfying as well. Comforting in that trying to change into something unfamiliar, actually changing to something state. And also I'm going to satisfy, I think, quite a deep longing in the human spirit that we actually miss ourselves. So we're going in with that kind of awareness, and I think that gives us a little bit more support in terms of the endeavor.
A part of last week's interview, which is inspired today, was that we may not even realize we have certain ideas about what change looks like. And it was quite, I found quite compelling in the commentary that I'm not trying to focus on these old habits, but I'm nurturing, or bad habits. It could be a bad or it could be old bad habits, but that I'm really nurturing that which is true. And perhaps maybe for some, like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And again, even just the habit of actually, just suppressing things come up inside. It's really easy for us just to talk about what kind of habits, but that's not really the point. And it's also easy to not realize we have ideas about change. And so originally was going to call this topic actually just the journey of change, actually. But specifically about habits, I can feel this into some souls who are practicing Raj Yoga. Sometimes they get quite disheartened, especially new students. Like, why is this stuff happening? Definitely, even just regular students, just that things are still there and not realizing, what do I do with that? Am I changing?
So it's this idea of focusing on nurturing and fighting against the old. I'm going to nurture the original, and for that, I need the right method. For everything in life, if I don't use the right method and then say it's not working, it's not really fair to the self. It's not working because I'm using the right method, not because I'm necessarily doing something other than using the right method. So I could be working very hard, but hard, disheartened. So with Raj Yoga, we understand if I want to activate the true nature, the original, I need to be in the original subconsciousness, and always using the idea of an actor in a play, that the actor puts on a costume, they assume the character, the habits of that character, and if they want to stop, they just take off the costume and remove themselves. It's naturally they return to the character that belongs to the actor inside. Same concept, but if I do that and keep fighting without that simple shift, I could be doing things happening and get disheartened when all I need to do is maybe stop and check, am I using the right method?
It's interesting because we often hear as regular students in this study about remembrance. It's about remembering. And there are a lot of, again, different approaches to what meditation is. And it's more about this context about clarifying what is the study about versus comparing it to others. But what is this study about? So, what does it mean to remember in this? Because it does get mixed up with mindfulness, happens often. But what is very unique about this in terms of change, in terms of what the focus is?
Some technical used to belong to again. So it's remembering the self, to true self again, that beautiful relationship, or sometimes we introduce the concept of to what impact does that have to again. So this is something that to me is very important in the concept of remembering. As well, when we talk about change, so often it's frightening, it's terrifying to souls change because it's connected to loss. And if heavy habits or addictions, there's now resistance as well. So it feels like it's a fight and there's going to be a loss. So who wants to engage in that? Just put my head in the sand. But that moving, of course, keeps gnawing on my heart. And so it's not that easy to ignore. I start to realize that the concept of change we're talking about is actually attainment rather than loss. It does involve letting go, but I'm letting go of something that has been creating loss. So if I let go of something that has been creating loss, that already is a gain. And of course, it's not the unfamiliar. It's something, again, that belongs to me very familiar. So it's almost a surrender, very odd kind of battle where the key activity is surrendering rather than grasping, manipulating, pushing, pulling, forcing. I am letting go to what is to emerge. So it's a very different energy and understanding. It does take us a while to get used to that because we're used to the other concepts of change. No pain, no gain, battling, there's going to be loss. So having to kind of shift those old ideas takes a little time.
If we were to just go into a simple cycle of thoughts going on inside, so what am I doing? Am I just watching them passively? Well, we know that's not really what we want to do, but am I having to break that cycle? Am I trying to have like a completely different commentary inside? Where's the difference from just, reframing, seeing the grass is greener on the other side versus what I am trying to do in this study?
One thing I enjoy a lot about Rajing is that we even use the word studying our way through a change, which already is quite unique. So I'm studying into this changed state or this return to my original state. And that means that understanding is going to be a huge part of the activity going on inside. One idea or description of change that I really appreciate is healing. So changing from a easy or diseased state to a healthy or wholesome state is a change. And that is the change we're talking about with spirituality, with Raj Yoga. And if we're doing that kind of so-called operation where we're healing, you're kind of constantly dousing the wounded part with water. Keep it clean, keep it clean, keep it clean. And that water is the water of understanding. So if some thoughts are going on, to changing a habituated thinking process is to get violent. Stop it. And I haven't really gotten to the stage of doing anything that's sustainable. But if I can wonder or shine the light of understanding what's behind that thinking, what is behind that thinking, and speak to that, now I'm doing something very powerful that might really create change. So I'm constantly going in there, patiently, with the light of understanding. And as I keep studying every day, my tools and resources of understanding I can use are becoming more and more refined and therefore powerful and effective.
So during the pandemic, we had so many topics about timing and time and time and time that I feel that it actually did grind into my heart, actually, that timing does feel like it has a big part. So I'm bringing up this word time. Like, what is your feeling in terms of your experience, maybe listening to some of the senior students about timing in terms of, we are in this study learning, hearing who you really are, and yet these old habits of, fighting, suppressing, judging. And then maybe one day I remember hearing one of the senior students say, "Oh, I don't actually have to think about those thoughts. I have the thought, but I don't actually have to." It kind of felt like she was saying there was some sort of click that happened inside, like as if timing did play a role.
So obviously the first time we talked about is, when is it my time to even embark on this journey? But the second one obviously is an exercise in patience. And patience doesn't mean I'm sitting around doing nothing. Patience means I'm very intentionally applying a method I trust, knowing that it will take time for the results. We understand this when it's physical. So again, at the fitness studio, if someone walks in, they are not into fitness. To go and bench press 300 pounds. That makes no sense. Even if that might be their objective, they know they have to go on a journey, take time, be very intentional, apply a method to build up the strength, and one day they do it. So get it physically, but it's going to take time, time that I use very wisely. But it's going to take time before I'm able to reach that objective. The same thing is spiritually. The point is I have to trust the method and stay very loyal to the method, very patient, intentional. Understand it's going to take time, but use the time wisely. So that's the issue, is because what we're doing is so subtle, so incognito. It could look like nothing's going on for quite a while, but it's drop by drop accumulating. And then one day, wow, that changed without any violence, or that's no longer happening. So that's the result of slowly accumulating over a long period of time.
We use the word confluence in this study, but in terms of an overlap, can you share more in terms of this overlap of change and perhaps I remember hearing another student sharing that she had an experience where she had, quite a bit of emotional, thoughts or feelings going on the side, and yet at the same time she was also feeling something very elevated, and she really wasn't really sure, was she in the right place in terms of what this change looks like.
So, powerful seats that we have to develop, really master internally, is the seat of being a detached observer. because there are going to be moments where it's like two things are happening at once, and to not become concerned or again disheartened, expect a switch overnight on this and something on that. But there's actually a fade over, a crossover. And of course, the best example that was given to me was this idea of synapse firing in the brain, that there are this habituated neural pathway that has been firing. It's not the original one. It's one that was acquired, and the original one has become a little dormant or latent. So I want to get that dormant one firing again, doing things that are precisely designed to make that happen. But the habitual one's going to keep firing as well, and we'll come at the same time. And it's a detached observer. I say, that's exactly what I can expect to happen. My attention is on this original pathway. That other one, just an observer of it. That's fine. That's totally normal. But this original one is going to fire. And it's very powerful. You do fitness class and you're working on some subtle alignment with the client. And you see them not really paying attention. And so the old is happening. But they have moments when we get the so they're master of them. To do the same. It's so cute. Or sometimes you just say exactly what you're going to say, and you can visibly see them correct themselves. Both alignments now are happening at the same time, and this is why that attention, the use of time wisely is so important. We actually become the master of two things, but we keep doing to restore understanding. It's going to keep fun. Just observe, but we keep monitoring the one we're trying to restore.
Things that comes up is emotions. So how about that? I mean, thoughts are one thing, but sometimes emotions are very strong. And what does one do there? You know, maybe there's some easy moments where it's like, oh, none of these thoughts, you know I can watch them. But when the emotions fire, is it how to ride it through, or is it more that just, just get back onto the drawing board? Maybe at those moments, I do hear again, students often feel like they're frozen, that at that time, they don't feel like they have power of what they're supposed to be thinking about, or even if they're thoughts that they want to have, the aspect of being able to feel something meaningful in the midst of all of those old things is where the challenge often lies.
Again, it depends on whether you're practicing the right method. We're told over and over again in this study to practice soul consciousness. And I know that's a whole nother conversation, but that's what we're told to do. So I'm going to have two things happening again at the same time. I, the student, am going to be practicing soul consciousness, which is helping me to develop power, different understanding, my intellect's changing. And then this other old stuff is still doing its thing. Over time, I'm able to engage or manage the old stuff in an increasingly different way if I'm doing this practice as well. I think what we sometimes think is I should just be able to manage it differently. Yes, but only if I'm doing this practice, if I'm developing that kind of spiritual strength. It's guaranteed I will be able to manage those emotions differently if I'm doing this practice. So if it's wonderful feedback, and yes, for the moment, I'm very emotional, and trust me, the emotions will pass, but it's wonderful feedback. I need to be practicing this thing over here. And this is form of aim and objective. We expect so much a direct approach to whatever comes up. And yet we're told, Dan said, oh, this happened? Let me explain. So conscious. Oh, this happened? Let me explain. Be so conscious. And what it's saying is, whatever stuff is going on, emotional to engaging with it, seeing it, therapying it, and I'm not devaluing therapy. Of course, it has its place, but we don't yet trust this indirect power of soul consciousness. So it's dragging on the whole thing. Far more simple if I just trusted, if I have a consistent practice of soul consciousness, it will to accumulate a stage that means I can engage with those emotions and thoughts in a different way over time.
Perhaps maybe the last question, just since how is this something maybe some students are here listening, maybe someone who's never heard of Raja Yoga. Can you share what soul consciousness is? Is it an experience? Is it a thought? Is it something visual? Listening to you share, it does feel like I need to have a very different experience of myself, but definitely, again, hearing from comments from different souls that what that quality of what that experience or what that approach of soul consciousness seems to be a big variety.
Practice of soul consciousness is very simple. It becomes a challenge for us, basically because of deep attachments. Soul consciousness or consciousness is how do I identify it as the to identify myself as the everything this body. I'm here inside again. Questions always been great. It's the actor to find the story, the costume, the character, the relationships, the props, everything. That means that they'll think and feel in a very specific way that they generally feel. The character of the costume. This costume, speaking some props, there's some other actors, but I forget myself. The consciousness, I am the actor inside, and I have this whole life off stage. So what's happened to us is we have completely forgotten ourselves and identified with the physical costume. Yes. So it's a really simple switch because we've invested so much in thinking with the costume, we actually interact with each other this way as well. Suddenly becomes very complicated. So there's certain arts I will have to develop to be able to make that switch. Timing, of course, am I ready to do this? But also the capacity to be present and to go inside and start to experience the subtle.
Thank you, Sister Judy. I know that's a really deep topic, a very important topic, an experiential topic. So perhaps maybe that's something we can cover in another session. We'll have a little reflection.
Different kinds of power in the world. But in essence, they come down to two categories: physical and non-physical or spiritual. Physical power is the power of matter, and also the power of ego, of greed, desire, anger. And then there's what we call the non-physical or soft powers, spiritual powers, power of truth, power of purity, power of peace, and the power of love. Perhaps that's where the journey of change, overcoming acquired addictions begin, is where something awakens inside one's own heart. A deep love for the self, a desire to truly benefit the self, not in a selfish way, but to restore my original, pure character, which is actually quite selfless, starts to awaken, and that energy of love will overcome so much resistance inside, but it constantly needs to be watered. The change, the missing my own original true nature, which is kind, peaceful, respectful, and pure. Shanti. Om Shanti. Thank you, Sister Jenny. Thank you for those who've joined with us online. Just a little reminder, next week on May 23rd on Saturday, we have our next Learn About meditation from 12:15 to 1:30. And once again, we have changed things a bit in terms of our live stream evening meditations, so they will only be offered on Sundays now. And then we have our online interview sessions on Tuesdays. There's still, I feel, some things on the website that need to be updated. And on site at the Inner Peace Center, English on Monday, 6:30 to 7:30, practical meditation. I believe it's Wednesday's evening meditation in Hindi. And then Thursdays at the Academy at 6:30 to 7 o'clock, right? And so please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you for joining. Om Shanti.